In the year 2847, a dying human pilot drifted through alien space with 17 hours of oxygen left. Every protocol said to let him die. One officer saved him anyway, and it destroyed her career, her reputation, her life. She died alone, forgotten, erased from history. But 63 years later, when that alien civilization faced extinction, something impossible happened. 12,000 human warships emerged from the darkness, led by a flagship called Remembrance, and the admiral at its helm carried the same last name as the pilot who was saved. Humans don't forget kindness. They don't abandon their debts. And when the galaxy tried to understand why an entire species would risk everything for aliens who once punished heroism, the answer was simple: because someone cared when they didn't have to. This is the story of how one act of compassion echoed across generations and changed the fate of 1 trillion lives. Part 1: The Forgotten Kindness. The universe had a long memory, but empires had short ones. Commander Vex'ari of the Solari Collective stared at the emergency beacon pulsing on her console, its crimson glow reflecting off her silver-scaled features. 300 standard cycles ago, this would have been impossible, a signal from the deepest reaches of uncharted space, carrying coordinates that shouldn't exist. Yet here it was, and the signature was unmistakable. "Human." "Commander," her tactical officer whispered, his 4 eyes widening with something between wonder and terror. "Our records show no Terran vessels operating in Sector Omega-9. This region was quarantined after the Void War." Vex'ari pulled up the historical archives, her claws dancing across the holographic interface. The files were old, centuries old, buried beneath layers of bureaucratic classification that should have kept them hidden forever. Until now. The image that materialized made her blood run cold. A small transport vessel, its hull scarred and burning, drifting through an asteroid field in Solari space. A single human inside, a young pilot named Marcus Chen, bleeding out with 17 hours of oxygen remaining. The official protocol had been clear: do not intervene. Humans were unknown entities, dangerous, unpredictable. But someone had intervened. "Pull up the personnel records from that incident," Vex'ari commanded. "I want to know who authorized the rescue." Her officer hesitated. "Commander, those files are sealed under Directive 7. Accessing them would." "Do it." The name that appeared on screen made Vex'ari sink into her command chair. Her grandmother, Fleet Admiral Thessaravin. 63 years ago, the most decorated officer in Solari history had committed career suicide by ordering a rescue mission for a single alien pilot from an unknown species. She had been stripped of her rank, exiled to a monitoring station on the edge of nowhere, and died alone 40 cycles later. All for one human. But that wasn't what made Vex'ari's heart stop beating. It was the addendum at the bottom of the file, a personal message from Marcus Chen, transmitted from Earth 3 years after his rescue. "To whoever saved my life, I don't know your name and you probably don't know mine, but I want you to know that I made it home. I told everyone what your people did for me, and we remember our debts. If you ever need us, send a signal to these coordinates. We will come." The coordinates matched the origin point of today's beacon. "Commander," her sensor officer called out, his voice trembling, "we're detecting incoming vessels, hundreds of them, no thousands." The view screen flickered to life, and Vex'ari witnessed something that defied everything she knew about the galaxy. A fleet was emerging from hyperspace, but not just any fleet. Terran warships stretched across the void like an awakening leviathan, dreadnoughts that dwarf space stations, carriers bleeding fighters like angry hornets, and at the center of the formation, a vessel so massive it created its own gravitational field. The flagship's name was painted across its hull in letters a kilometer long. "TSS Remembrance." "We're being hailed," The communications officer squeaked. The transmission that filled the bridge was a single human voice, calm, measured, and carrying the weight of centuries. "This is Admiral Victoria Chen of the Terran Collective, great-granddaughter of Marcus Chen. 63 years ago, your people saved my ancestor when they had every reason to let him die. We've been waiting a long time to repay that kindness. Your distress beacon mentioned something about an extinction-level threat. We brought friends." Behind the Terran fleet, more ships began emerging from hyperspace. Thousands more. And they weren't human. Part 2. The Council of ASHES. 12 hours earlier, the Galactic Conclave had made a decision that would doom trillions. High Chancellor Mordrin slammed his fist against the obsidian table, sending holographic displays flickering across the chamber. "The Vex'ari Swarm cannot be stopped. Our combined fleets have been decimated. 17 homeworlds have already fallen. We have no choice but to initiate the Exodus Protocol." Around him, representatives from 47 species sat in stunned silence. The Vex'ari, a hive mind of biomechanical terrors that consumed entire civilizations to fuel their expansion, had emerged from the galactic core like a plague made manifest. Their numbers were infinite, their hunger eternal. "And what of those who cannot evacuate?" demanded Ambassador Cathal, his reptilian features twisted with rage. "The Solari colonies, the Meridian trade worlds, you would abandon billions to be devoured." "We would save what can be saved," Mordrin replied coldly. "The math is simple. The Vex'ari cannot be defeated. We can only flee." "There is another option." Every eye in the chamber turned to the small, hunched figure at the far end of the table. Elder Vex'ari, the oldest living member of the Conclave, rarely spoke. When he did, empires listened. "We could ask the humans for help." The chamber erupted. "Impossible," shouted the Meridian delegate. "The humans isolated themselves after the partition wars. They haven't communicated with the greater galaxy in over a century." "Because we gave them every reason not to," Vex'ari replied quietly. "We exploited their resources, stole their technology, sold their colonies to the highest bidder, and when they finally unified and demanded respect, we laughed in their faces." He turned to face Chancellor Mordrin directly. "Tell me, Chancellor, do you know why the humans stopped fighting us? Why they simply withdrew behind their borders and went silent?" Mordrin shifted uncomfortably. Their military was exhausted, their economy in ruins. They had no choice. "Wrong." Vex'ari's ancient eyes blazed with something between admiration and fear. "They stopped fighting because they realized something we never did. War is not about destroying your enemies. It's about making them irrelevant." He activated a hidden display, and the chamber fell deathly silent. The hologram showed human space, a region once considered a minor territory on the galactic fringe. But the data now streaming across the display painted a different picture entirely. Shipyards that stretched across entire solar systems. Manufacturing complexes that harvested gas giants for fuel. Defense networks so sophisticated they made conclave technology look primitive. And at the center of it all, a population count that made several delegates physically recoil. 47 billion humans, Vex'ari announced, united under a single government, supported by the most advanced industrial base in known space, and completely, utterly silent for the past 100 years. "Why show us this now?" whispered Cathal. "Because the Vex'ari reached human space 3 weeks ago." The hologram changed, showing a swarm of bioships entering the outer territories of the Terran Collective. Then it showed what happened next. The human response wasn't a battle, it was an execution. Wave after wave of Vex'ari ships dissolved under weapons that didn't appear in any conclave database. Defense platforms that materialized from nowhere. Fighter squadrons that fought with a coordination that bordered on telepathic. In 47 minutes, a Vex'ari invasion force of 60,000 vessels was reduced to atoms. The humans didn't just survive, Vex'ari said softly. They won, decisively, and now they're mobilizing their entire fleet. To defend themselves, Mordrin asked hopefully. No, Vex'ari shook his head slowly. To repay a debt. Apparently, one of their ancestors was rescued by a Solari officer decades ago. They've been monitoring Solari distress frequencies ever since, waiting for a chance to return the favor. The chamber erupted into chaos once more, but Vex'ari wasn't finished. I've taken the liberty of transmitting our situation to human command, he announced. They've already responded. The hologram shifted one final time, showing a message from Admiral Victoria Chen. You let my great-grandfather die alone in the dark. One Solari officer saved him anyway. We remember. Stand by for assistance. Try not to get in our way. The conclave had no response. Part 3. The Debt Collectors. The Vex'ari hive mind had consumed 847 civilizations across 14 galaxies. It had existed for 3 million years. It had never encountered anything it couldn't devour. Until now. Deep within the pulsing neural mass at the center of the swarm, the hive mind processed an emotion it had never experienced before. Confusion. The creatures from the third spiral arm were anomalies. They shouldn't exist. Their ships were small, their numbers limited, their lifespans laughably brief. By every metric the hive mind used to assess prey, they were insignificant. And yet they kept winning. The first engagement had been dismissed as a statistical anomaly. The second, a tactical miscalculation. By the seventh consecutive defeat, the hive mind had been forced to reassess its assumptions. These creatures, humans, they called themselves, fought like no species the swarm had ever encountered. They didn't flee when outnumbered, they adapted. They didn't surrender when cornered, they improvised. They didn't fight for survival, they fought for each other. And now they were coming, not to defend their own territory, but to protect species that had once been their enemies. The hive mind couldn't comprehend it. Resources were finite. Why would any species expend them protecting others? The answer arrived in the form of 12,000 warships emerging from hyperspace above the Solari homeworld. Admiral Victoria Chen stood on the bridge of the TSS Remembrance, watching the Vex'ari Swarm reconfigure itself to meet her fleet. She was 63 years old, with silver hair and eyes that had seen 3 wars and countless horrors. But she was smiling. Admiral, her tactical officer reported, enemy vessels are forming a defensive perimeter. Estimated strength, 400,000 bioships. Strength isn't about numbers, Lieutenant. Victoria tapped a command into her chair's interface. It's about conviction. The Allied fleet, Terran, Solari, and 46 other species who had answered humanity's call, spread out across the void. They were still outnumbered 20-1. By conventional calculations, they should be preparing to die. Instead, they were preparing to fight. Open a channel to the swarm, Victoria ordered. Her communications officer looked startled. Admiral, the Vex'ari don't negotiate. They've never responded to any attempt at communication. They'll respond to this one. The channel opened, and Victoria spoke clearly. Attention, Vex'ari Collective. I am Admiral Victoria Chen of the Terran Collective. You're probably wondering why we're here. The short answer is revenge, but not our revenge. She gestured at the fleet arrayed behind her, ships from dozens of species, united for the first time in galactic history. You've spent 3 million years consuming everything in your path because nothing could stop you. That ends today. Not because we're stronger than you, not because we're smarter, but because unlike every other species you've faced, we don't fight alone. The hive mind processed this message and found it meaningless. Unity was weakness. Cooperation was inefficiency. These creatures would fall like all the others. But then the human continued. 63 years ago, my great-grandfather was dying alone in space. A Solari officer saved his life when she had every reason not to. She was punished for it. Exiled. Forgotten. But we didn't forget. We never forget kindness. And we never forgive cruelty. Victoria leaned forward in her chair, and her smile disappeared. You've preyed on the weak for 3 million years. You've consumed civilizations that never had a chance to fight back. Today, the galaxy fights back, and we're going to teach you something new. The human fleet began its advance, weapons powering up across 12,000 hulls. We're going to teach you fear. The hive mind felt the second, unfamiliar emotion of its existence. It felt small. Part 4. The Battle of Solari Prime. War in space is silent. The explosions that tore through the Vex'ari Swarm made no sound. The dying screams of bioships decomposing under human plasma fire were silent whispers in the void. The desperate transmissions of Solari civilians watching the battle from their homeworld traveled through vacuum without a single noise. But the silence was deafening. Commander Velris had been ordered to evacuate with the civilian fleet. Instead, she had commandeered an old patrol cruiser and joined the Allied formation, her grandmother's disgrace burning in her mind like a star going nova. This was her chance to make it right. Velris, you are not authorized to participate in combat operations. Admiral Chen's voice crackled over her comm system. Return to the evacuation corridor immediately. With respect, Admiral, I have a debt of my own to repay. My grandmother saved your ancestor. I intend to honor her sacrifice. A long pause, then. Understood, Commander. Fall in with the 7th Attack Wing, and try not to die. The Solari cruiser slid into formation alongside human frigates and fighters from 6 different species. They were a patchwork force, ships of different designs, different technologies, different languages. They should have been chaos. Instead, they were beautiful. The battle plan was insane by conventional standards. Human commanders had proposed diving directly into the heart of the Vex'ari Swarm, targeting the neural clusters that coordinated their hive mind. It required precision flying through a hurricane of bioships, with no margin for error and virtually no chance of survival. The Allied commanders had voted unanimously in favor. All wings, this is Admiral Chen. The Vex'ari have never faced a coordinated multi-species assault. They don't know how to process enemies who cooperate. Use that. Cover your wingmates, trust the ships beside you, and remember why we're here. The fleet plunged into the swarm. What followed was the most brutal engagement in galactic history. Bioships swarmed the Allied formation from every angle, their acidic tendrils dissolving shields and hull plating alike. Human carriers launched wave after wave of fighters, each pilot knowing they probably wouldn't return. Solari destroyers sacrificed themselves to create openings for the main assault force. Ships from species that had been enemies for millennia fought side by side, their old hatreds forgotten in the face of extinction. And slowly, impossibly, they started winning. The Vex'ari couldn't adapt. Every tactical response they attempted was countered by a species they hadn't accounted for. Their overwhelming numbers meant nothing when the enemy fought as one unified force instead of individual prey. For the first time in 3 million years, the swarm was losing. Deep within her neural cluster, the hive mind made a decision. If these creatures wanted to fight together, she would show them the consequences. She ordered the largest bioship in her swarm, a vessel the size of a small moon, to change course. Towards Solari Prime. Admiral Chen saw it on her tactical display and felt her blood run cold. The dreadnought bioship was bypassing the entire fleet, heading directly for the civilian population. All ships, we have a planetary threat inbound. Estimated impact, 14 minutes. Vel'Ari heard the transmission and made her own calculation. Her patrol cruiser was in the wrong position to intercept. The only ship close enough was a human frigate, badly damaged, trailing plasma fire, its crew already dead except for a single pilot. She opened a direct channel. "Human vessel, this is Commander Vel'Ari. Do you copy?" Static, then a weak voice. "Copy, Commander. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, grandson of the original Marcus Chen. Small galaxy, right?" Vel'Ari felt something shift in her chest, a connection across species and generations that shouldn't have been possible. "Your grandfather was saved by my grandmother. I won't let his legacy end here." "Neither will I." The human frigate turned toward the bioship, its engine screaming beyond safety limits. Vel'Ari understood immediately what he intended. "Lieutenant, no, there has to be another way." "There isn't, Commander, but you can make it count. When I hit that monster, it'll destabilize for about 30 seconds. That's your window, take it." The frigate accelerated. "Tell the Admiral, tell her we remembered, all the way to the end." The ship struck the bioship like a meteor, its fusion core detonating on impact. For exactly 28 seconds, the bioship's organic systems convulsed in agony. Vel'Ari didn't waste a single one. Her patrol cruiser dove through the gap Lieutenant Chen had created, targeting the exposed neural cluster at the dreadnought's core. Her weapons were weak. Her shields were failing. She had no chance of survival. She fired anyway. The explosion that followed could be seen from the surface of Solari Prime. The bioship, large enough to destroy a planet, came apart in a cascade of dying organic matter, its death throes rippling through the swarm's collective consciousness. And in that moment, something unprecedented happened. The Vex'ari felt fear, real, overwhelming, paralyzing fear. Their hive mind had experienced loss before, but never like this. Never through sacrifice, never through a death that meant something. The swarm hesitated, and the Allied fleet tore them apart. Part 5: The Aftermath. 3 days after the Battle of Solari Prime, the Galactic Conclave convened for the first time since the war began. The chamber was silent as Admiral Victoria Chen entered, flanked by Commander Vel'Ari, who had somehow survived her attack and been recovered by Terran rescue teams. The human walked with the weight of victory on her shoulders, but no joy in her eyes. 12,000 ships had engaged the Vex'ari. 4,000 had survived. Lieutenant Marcus Chen II was not among them. "Admiral Chen," High Chancellor Mordrin began, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "On behalf of the Galactic Conclave, I wish to extend our..." "Save it." Victoria's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Every delegate fell silent. 4,000 humans died yesterday, along with crews from 46 other species. They died because the galaxy couldn't stop fighting itself long enough to face a real threat. They died because you were all too proud, too stupid, or too scared to ask for help, until extinction was literally on your doorstep. She let that sink in before continuing. But they also died for something worth dying for. For the first time in galactic history, different species fought side by side. Not because they had to, because they chose to, because they saw something worth protecting beyond their own survival. Victoria turned to Vel'Ari, and her expression softened slightly. 63 years ago, a Solari officer risked everything to save one human pilot. She was punished for it, exiled, forgotten. But her granddaughter flew into certain death to protect a planet full of people she'd never met, because that's what her grandmother would have done. She looked back at the conclave. That's what we protected today. Not territory, not resources, not pride. We protected the possibility that the galaxy could be better than it's been, that different species could trust each other, that kindness could echo across generations and change the course of history. Admiral Chen reached into her uniform and produced a small medal, the Terran Cross of Valor, the highest honor humanity could bestow. On behalf of the Terran Collective, I posthumously award this medal to Fleet Admiral Thessaravan of the Solari Collective, for her courage in saving a stranger, for her sacrifice in standing by her principles, and for inspiring 3 generations of Chens to believe that some things are worth fighting for. She handed the medal to Vel'Ris, who accepted it with trembling claws. "The debt is paid," Victoria said quietly, "but the lesson is just beginning." High Chancellor Mordrin stood slowly, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "Admiral Chen, Commander Vel'Ris, the Conclave has failed the galaxy in countless ways. We allowed division and prejudice to blind us to our common threats. We exploited humanity when we should have embraced you. We punished heroism when we should have celebrated it." He bowed his head. "But today, we learned something. We learned that the galaxy is stronger together. We learned that kindness matters. And we learned that humans are absolutely terrifying when they decide to protect something." A ripple of laughter passed through the chamber, nervous, uncomfortable but genuine. "If humanity is willing," Mordrin continued, "we would like to propose a formal alliance. Not just military cooperation but true partnership, built on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and the understanding that no species, no matter how small or weak, should ever face extinction alone." Admiral Chen considered this for a long moment. "Humanity didn't come here for power or territory. We came to repay a debt. We came because one Solari officer showed us that kindness exists beyond species boundaries. That compassion isn't weakness. It's the foundation of everything worth building." She stepped forward and extended her hand, a human gesture of trust and agreement. "We accept your offer, Chancellor, on one condition." "Name it." "We build a memorial, not for the dead, though they deserve one, but for the living. A place where the galaxy can remember what happens when we stand together. A place where future generations can learn that the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies, it's making them unnecessary." Mordrin clasped the Admiral's hand. "It will be done." Outside the chamber, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the struggles of mortals, unchanging across millennia. But something had shifted in the fabric of galactic civilization, a tiny crack in the walls that had separated species for millions of years. And through that crack, light was beginning to pour. Commander Vel'Ris found Admiral Chen standing alone on an observation deck that evening, staring out at the stars. "Lieutenant Chen," Vel'Ris said quietly, "your cousin he was." "He was exactly like his namesake," Victoria replied. "Reckless, brave, absolutely convinced that one person could make a difference." She smiled, but there were tears in her eyes, and he was right. "My grandmother believed the same thing. She saved your ancestor knowing it would cost her everything." "Did she ever regret it?" Vel'Ris considered the question. "I found her personal logs after she died. Her last entry, written the day before she passed, contained only one line." "What did it say?" "I would do it again, without hesitation, without regret, because the universe is vast and cold and cruel, but even a single act of kindness can echo forever." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Then she understood something most people never learn," she finally said. "That the measure of a civilization isn't its power or its wealth or its technology. It's what it does when no one is watching, when there's nothing to gain, when the only reason to act is because it's right." She turned to face Vel'Ris. "Your grandmother saved one human pilot. That one act created a chain of events that just saved the entire galaxy. Every person who survived the Vex'ari exists because of her choice. Every species that will flourish in the alliance we're building today does so because one Solari officer decided that life was worth protecting." Victoria placed her hand on Vel'Ris's shoulder. "That's not just a debt, that's a legacy, and we're going to make sure the galaxy never forgets it." Above them the stars burned on infinite, ancient, and finally perhaps a little less lonely.